The conventional script of romance and relationship is one most men learn by osmosis from a young age. It is a narrative of pursuit, of proof, of persistence. It tells him that to win a woman's heart, he must demonstrate his loyalty through unwavering attention, his devotion through gradual sacrifice, and his love through a quiet erosion of his own boundaries. He is taught that her occasional distance is a test of his commitment, and that his correct response is to bridge that gap with more of himself, more communication, more vulnerability, more reassurance. In this script, his fear of losing her is not a weakness. It is the engine of the plot, the proof of his investment. He orbits her emotional sun, his own light defined by the warmth he reflects from her. This is the dynamic that feels so natural, so ingrained, that its disruption feels like a violation of a fundamental law. And that is precisely what occurs when a man steps out of this gravitational pull. The truth that shakes the foundation is not that he stops caring, but that he stops being afraid. The moment a woman senses that a man's peace is more valuable to him than her presence, the entire architecture of the unspoken power dynamic begins to fracture. Her leverage has always been emotional. It resides in the silent, mutual understanding that her withdrawal, whether a cold tone, a delayed text, or a threat of leaving, will trigger a predictable response in him, a scramble to appease, a negotiation of his own worth, a fight for her attention. This is the currency of her control. She thrives not on his love, but on the certainty of his reaction. When she pulls away and encounters not resistance, but a quiet, unyielding peace, the mechanism jams. The lever she pulled, expecting a familiar sound, results only in silence. The man who would rather walk away in peace than fight for scraps of attention becomes an anomaly in her experience. He is no longer predictable. His emotional state is no longer tethered to her moods, where she expected to find a man off balance. Anxiously checking his phone or crafting pleading messages, she finds instead a man who is still. He is still focused on his work. He is still going to the gym. He is still present in his own life. This stillness is not the cold void of indifference. It is the solid, unshakable presence of a man who is rooted in something deeper and more stable than the approval of another. This is the point where her internal panic begins, quiet at first, then rising. It is not the panic of losing his affection in the moment. She may even believe she wants that. It is the panic of a system collapsing, her entire operating system. For understanding and influencing a relationship is built on the predictability of the male response. She knows how to navigate a man who is afraid to lose her. She knows which buttons to press and what levers to pull. But this man, this new variable, does not fit the model. He becomes psychologically untraceable. His actions are no longer simple reactions to her own. He moves from a source internal and opaque to her. For the first time, she is dealing with a man whose emotional world does not orbit around her, but around his own purpose, his own code, his own unassailable sense of self. This shift is seismic. It forces her out of the role of the conductor and into the role of an observer or even a participant on equal, uncertain footing. The game as she knew it has not just changed. It has ended. A new one has begun, with rules she did not write and does not yet understand. The man who is not afraid to lose her introduces a terrifying and fascinating variable: authentic choice. When he demonstrates through his calm acceptance of her potential departure that he will be fundamentally okay regardless of her decision, he removes the element of emotional coercion. Her staying or leaving becomes a genuine choice, not a maneuver for power or a play for validation. This is profoundly disarming. The power she once held was the power to threaten the stability of his world. But when she looks and sees that his world remains stable, orderly, and purpose-driven, even as she stands at the exit, that power evaporates. This is the core of why she cannot handle it. It is not about a lack of feeling, but an overload of a new, unsettling reality. She is confronted with a man whose value is self-determined, not negotiated through her attention or withdrawal. Communicates without a word that his identity is not built upon the foundation of us, but upon the bedrock of I. And the U.S. can only be a beautiful addition to that solid structure. never a necessary support for a crumbling one. This is the realization that truly shakes her. Men who are not afraid to lose a woman are the only ones who can offer a love that is free, rather than one that is desperate. And in that freedom lies a strength that is both intimidating and irresistibly magnetic, forcing a reckoning not just with him but with her own patterns and the very nature of what she thought she wanted. The conditioning runs deep, a cultural undercurrent that shapes a man's understanding of love into a transaction of sacrifice. He is taught, often through subtle societal cues and romanticized narratives, that to prove his devotion is to willingly offer up pieces of himself on the altar of the relationship. His time, his hobbies, his friendships, and ultimately, his self-respect become currencies in a desperate bid to prove his loyalty. He believes that the depth of his love is measured by the magnitude of his surrender. This is the grand deception, the setup for a silent, soul-crushing defeat. For the moment a man begins to fear the loss of a woman, he has already, in the most critical way, lost her. The vibrant, dynamic attraction that sparked the connection begins to wither. Replaced by the cold mechanics of control and anxiety, this fear is a poison that works slowly but relentlessly. It begins as a knot in the stomach when she seems distant, a low-grade hum of worry that something is wrong. This fear, in an attempt to secure what it treasures, mutates into control. He begins to monitor her moods, to tailor his behavior to avoid provoking her displeasure, to seek constant reassurance. He might check her social media activity, read into the tone of her texts, or demand to know her plans. This control is not born of malice, but of a terrified need to stabilize a world that feels like it is slipping away. Yet this very act of clinging is what makes the things slip faster. Control is the antithesis of freedom, and without a sense of freedom and autonomy, attraction cannot breathe. It becomes suffocated under the weight of expectation and scrutiny. The man who is controlled by this fear radiates an energy of neediness and instability. He becomes a mirror that only reflects her back to herself, having lost his own substantive image. This is why a woman cannot respect a man who treats her as the center of his universe. In making her his everything, he annihilates his own identity, and in doing so, makes himself uninteresting, predictable, and ultimately burdensome. She is placed on a pedestal, but it is a gilded cage for both of them. She looks down and sees not a partner to stand beside, but a devotee to be managed. The weight of being someone's entire world is immense. It is a responsibility that breeds resentment, not passion. She did not ask to be the sun in his sky, and the constant, desperate heat of his orbit becomes oppressive. The man who commands genuine respect and enduring attraction is the one who is himself a universe. His life is a rich tapestry woven with purpose, ambition, friendships, and personal passions. He is a sovereign entity, complete and functional on his own. Love for him is not the purpose of his existence, but a magnificent addition to it. It is the beautiful landscape he gets to enjoy on his already meaningful journey, not the destination he is desperately trying to reach. This mindset is the bedrock of true masculine power. It is a calm assertiveness that knows its own worth and operates from a place of wholeness, not lack. He can love deeply and fully, but his core emotional stability is not outsourced to her. Her bad day does not have to become his. Her emotional storm does not have to capsize his ship. He can remain as the anchor, steady and unmoved, providing a safe harbor precisely because he is not also being tossed about by the same waves. This is not emotional withdrawal or a lack of caring. It is the highest form of caring because it is clean and free from coercion. He cares from a place of strength, not from a place of desperation. He can listen to her troubles without feeling the compulsive need to fix them for his own peace of mind. He can offer support without the silent string of needing her to feel better for him. This emotional independence is what makes his support valuable. When he offers comfort, it is a genuine gift, not a bid for security. When he sets a boundary, it is not an ultimatum designed to punish, but a simple, non-negotiable statement of his own self-respect. He refuses to engage in dramas that cost him his peace, not because he is above her, but because he values the sanctity of his own inner world. This is the profound shift that transforms fleeting infatuation into lasting respect. Attraction can bloom in the soil of mystery and challenge, but it can only put down deep roots in the bedrock of respect. And a woman cannot respect a man she can break. She can only respect the man who, when tested, reveals a core that is unbreakable. His world does not fall apart when she leaves because it was never built around her to begin with. This is not a rejection of her importance, but a demonstration of his own fundamental stability. He is the oak tree, not the weather vane spinning with her every-changing wind. And in a world of constant change and uncertainty, the solid, reliable presence of the oak is infinitely more attractive, safe, and worthy of respect than the frantic, directionless spinning of the weather vane. No matter how attentively it follows her every move, the terrain of a relationship is not a static, peaceful plain. It is a landscape that is constantly tested by subtle, seismic shifts. A woman's challenge is the sudden distance, the sharp word. The withdrawn affection are often misinterpreted as the prelude to an ending. The man conditioned by fear reads these signs as a five-alarm fire, triggering a desperate response to salvage, to explain, to chase. He believes he is fighting for the relationship, but in reality, he is failing the examination. These tests are rarely a conscious, malicious strategy. They are at their core an instinctual and primal inquiry. She is probing the structure of his character, searching for the load-bearing walls of his inner strength to see if they will hold. She needs to know, on a level deeper than words, that if her own world spirals into chaos, his will not. That if she pushes against him, she will find not emptiness, but a solid, unyielding presence. When a man reacts to this distance with panic, he confirms her deepest suspicion that his stability was a performance. His chase is a confession that his emotional state is dependent on her proximity. By scrambling to close the gap she created, he validates the very power she was testing. He demonstrates that she holds the key to his sense of well-being. This predictability is the death knell of raw attraction. She learns the formula: pull away, and he will pursue. This knowledge does not inspire respect. It inspires a quiet contempt, a sense of being anchored to a vessel that is itself adrift. The man who fails this test proves that his world does, in fact, collapse without her, revealing his proclaimed strength as a facade. The man who understands the nature of this inquiry does the counterintuitive. He stands still. His response to her distance is not a mirror of her energy, is not coldness for coldness, silence for silence. It is instead a profound and unshakable peace. He does not chase. He remains grounded in his own life. He invests in his mission, his health, his friendships. He is not ignoring her as a punishment. He is simply refusing to abandon his own center to orbit hers in a moment of crisis. This non-reaction is the most powerful response he can offer. Her absence, which she expected to create a vacuum of anxiety in his life, instead creates only silence. This silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. It is the sound of a man who is complete. This silence becomes a deafening echo in her mind. For a woman whose influence is often measured by the emotional reactions she can elicit, the absence of that reaction is a form of psychological disorientation. The levers she pulled, expecting a certain noise, have come away in her hands, and the quiet that follows is unbearable. It forces her out of the role of the tester and into the role of the questioned. His peace becomes a mirror, and in it, she is forced to see her own behavior with sudden, uncomfortable clarity. His calmness exposes the chaos of her test. His emotional sovereignty highlights her own dependence on his reaction for her sense of control. The dynamic flips not because he sought to control her, but because he mastered his own need to react. In this space, her attempts to reestablish the old dynamic will often intensify. She may become colder, more distant, or create new dramas, all in a final, instinctual attempt to provoke the familiar response, to prove she still holds the map to his emotions. This is the critical juncture. The man who wavers, who breaks his silence with a plea or an accusation, confirms that her methods still work and resets the entire dysfunctional pattern. But the man who remains unfazed, who meets her escalating tests with the same steady calm, communicates a final, unassailable truth. Her access to his emotional core is a privilege he grants, not a right she can command. This is the ultimate loss of her grip. It is the realization that she cannot guilt him, cannot provoke him, cannot emotionally corner him. The power she held was the power to disturb his waters, and now she finds them still and deep, reflecting only his own unwavering self-worth back at her. This is not a victory he declares, but a reality she is forced to confront. The punishment she feels is not one he actively administers. It is the natural consequence of her actions meeting a man whose self-respect is non-negotiable. He is not trying to teach her a lesson. His very being is the lesson. And in that quiet, unyielding presence, she finally sees the man she truly craves, not the one who fights for her attention, but the one whose attention is so valuable because it is given freely from a place of unshakable inner abundance. When a man ceases to be a predictable source of emotional reaction, he undergoes a transformation in a woman's psyche. He ceases to be merely a partner or a suitor and becomes a psychological puzzle, an equation that refuses to balance. The familiar rhythm of stimulus and response, her withdrawal followed by his pursuit, is broken, and the resulting silence is a void her mind cannot tolerate. Humans are meaning-making machines, and when presented with behavior that defies their established models, they do not simply move on. They obsess. They pick at the loose thread of the unknown, unraveling the entire garment of their understanding in an attempt to make it fit. His calm detachment is not a closed door, but a labyrinth, and she finds herself compelled to navigate it, driven by a need to solve the mystery of his composure. This is where the dynamic shifts from a test of strength to a profound internal unraveling. Her initial confusion curdles into a focused obsession. She begins the silent, relentless work of forensic analysis, replaying every past interaction, dissecting every word he didn't say, scrutinizing every moment of his unflinching calm. She scrolls through old messages, not to relive affection, but to search for clues she missed. Was there a hint of this strength before? Was his patience a form of hidden judgment? His past kindnesses are reevaluated through this new, unsettling lens. What she once interpreted as devotion, she now questions as a form of silent, superior observation. This is not a conscious process, but a subconscious torrent. The ego's frantic attempt to recategorize a threat to its perceived power. In this state, she will often launch a final, desperate offensive. She may attempt to provoke emotion directly picking a fight, flirting with indifference, or even threatening a final dramatic exit. This is not a genuine desire to leave, but a last-ditch effort to force the familiar reaction. To prove that the levers of power, though stiff, still work. It is the emotional equivalent of jiggling a key in a stubborn lock. She needs to see him flinch, to see a crack in the armor, to confirm that she still, in some fundamental way, matters enough to disturb his peace. To her, his emotional reaction is the currency of her relevance. His continued silence, therefore, feels not like indifference, but like a devastating declaration of her own insignificance. When he still does not provide the expected response, when he meets her escalation with the same grounded peace. Perhaps even looking her in the eye and calmly saying, "You should do what you feel is right," the final pillar of her control collapses. The provocation has failed. The test has been definitively and peacefully failed by her. This is the moment the obsession turns inward. The energy she was directing at solving him now refracts back onto herself. The question shifts from "what is he thinking?" to a far more terrifying one. Why isn't he reacting? This question, left to echo in the silence he provides, becomes a corrosive force. It implies a possibility she has never before had to consider, that perhaps she was never as important as she assumed, that her power was not an inherent trait, but a conditional grant he has now revoked. This realization births a profound and unsettling sense of inadequacy. She begins to feel that she has lost access not just to his affection, but to a version of herself that was reflected in his eyes. When he adored her, she felt valuable. When he chased her, she felt powerful. Now, his calm detachment, holds up a mirror that shows none of that. It reflects back only her own chaotic attempts to regain control, making her feel immature and unstable by contrast. His peace exposes her chaos. His self-containment exposes her dependence. The roles reverse not because he sought to make her chase, but because he stopped running. The validation she once received from his pursuit. She must now seek from him, in a new form, the validation of his respect, which he only grants to those who do not try to steal his peace. And so she begins to chase. It starts subtly a view of his social media story, a like on an old photo, a text message that seems casual but is bursting with unspoken inquiry. "Hey, how have you been?" is never just a question. It is a probe, a confession disguised as curiosity, her ego's final attempt to feel relevant in the emotional world of a man who has proven he can live without her. She is now trapped in the very dynamic she once commanded. She is the one overthinking, playing and analyzing the silence. She is the one seeking a signal of her own worth in his calm, impenetrable demeanor. He has become the standard, the benchmark of emotional strength, and in the quiet of her own mind, she is forced to measure herself against it, finding everything else and everyone else lacking. The journey does not culminate in a triumphant return or a scene of tearful reconciliation. The true destination is not her realization of his value, but his own profound and unshakable realization of it. The initial silence, born of pain and self-preservation, undergoes a metamorphosis. It ceases to be a reaction to her and becomes a reflection of him. It is no longer an empty space where his attention to her used to be, but a fertile ground where he has chosen to build. The energy that was once siphoned away, the mental bandwidth consumed by decoding her moods, the emotional capacity spent on managing her chaos. The time invested in chasing her validation is reclaimed. This reclaimed energy is potent. It becomes the fuel for his transformation. He lifts, he reads, he works, he builds. He rediscovers the friendships he neglected and the missions he abandoned. He does not do this for an audience. He does it for the simple, profound reason that it is who he is, or who he is remembering himself to be. This rebuilding is not a performance. It is a homecoming. As he invests in himself, his aura begins to shift. The nervous energy of neediness is replaced by the calm frequency of purpose. He walks differently. His gait is no longer hurried by the anxiety of losing someone, but measured by the rhythm of his own intent. He speaks differently. His words are no longer crafted to persuade or appease, but to express what is true. He no longer explains himself. For his actions, his progress, his peace, his discipline now speak for him with an eloquence no justification could ever match. He is not playing hard to get. He has simply become hard to affect, because his emotional center of gravity is now located firmly within himself. Inevitably, she will see this transformation. It might be a photograph where his posture seems different, some mutual friend's casual remark about his new venture, or the palpable shift in his energy if their paths cross. This sight is the final, devastating blow to the narrative she has constructed. She sees that the man she underestimated is not just surviving without her. He is thriving. He is not broken in the silence. He was forged by it. The version of him that loved Hertha One, who was enmeshed in her emotional patterns, has, in a sense, died. The man who exists now is a successor, stronger and more complete, and he bears no resentment. Only a quiet gratitude for the lesson she embodied. This is the ultimate closure, and it is one he gives himself. Her attempts to circle back the, "Hey, how have you been?" texts, the lingering looks, are now met not with coldness, but with a peaceful, almost bemused detachment. He can look at her and no longer see the woman who held his heart in her hands, but the catalyst that forced him to reclaim it. He feels no urge to punish her, to prove her wrong, or to make her see. His own state of being is proof enough. He has learned the hardest and most liberating truth, that love without respect is a form of psychological slavery, and that no amount of history or chemistry can compensate for the loss of one's own peace. Her haunting, then, is not about his absence, but about the presence of what he has become. He becomes the standard she cannot unsee. Every new man she meets will be subconsciously measured against his calm composure. The ones who chase too hard will seem desperate, lacking his self-contained purpose. The ones who are aloof will seem cold, lacking his capacity for deep, non-needy love. He has become the ghost in her relational machine, the memory of a balance that is tragically rare. She will realize, in a series of quiet, lonely moments, that she did not just lose a person. She lost a quality of existence. She lost access to the emotional safety and stability that his grounded presence provided, the very safety she tested until it wisely chose to protect itself. The legacy of such a man is not written in the arguments he won or the pleas he made. It is etched in the energy he now radiates. He is the man who, when faced with the storm of another's chaos, did not break, but instead learned to become the anchor. He is the man who chose his dignity over drama, his purpose over pursuit, and his peace over passion. He learned that the most powerful form of strength is not a loud, explosive force, but a quiet, immovable one. It is the strength to walk away not with a slammed door, but with a quiet click, turning the lock on a chapter that needed to end, and stepping into a life that was waiting to begin. Long after the specific memories have faded, she will remember the feeling he left behind, the unsettling, admirable, and unforgettable impression of a man who was truly and irrevocably unbroken. And in the end, that is the only victory that matters.